Paris, June 1940. Early morning. The city is quiet in a way it has never been quiet before. Not the quiet of Sunday or of winter or of the hours before the market opens. A different quiet, the quiet of a city listening to itself, uncertain of what it now is. The streets are clean, the buildings stand. The Seine moves exactly as it always has. No French flags hang from the windows. Only the unfamiliar geometry of another nation's colors, placed there by other hands. A woman walks along the Rue de Rivoli with a string bag over her arm and her eyes directed forward. Not down, forward. This is a decision made some weeks ago and maintained each morning since. To look down is to diminish. To look at them is to acknowledge. Forward is the only remaining direction that costs nothing. Her shoes are good shoes, worn carefully, resoled once already since the occupation began. She walks at her usual pace, not faster, not slower. Pace is information. A changed pace tells observers something. She has decided to tell them nothing. The string bag contains 2 items, a small purse and a folded list. The list was written the night before at the kitchen table. What is needed, in what order of priority, from which shops. Organization of this kind is not new to her. She has always been organized. The occupation has simply made organization a more precise necessity. She passes 2 German soldiers standing at the corner of the Rue de Castiglione. They are young. They are talking to each other. They do not look at her. She does not look at them. The corner is passed. The street continues. Germany entered Paris on June 14, 1940. The French government had already fled. The occupation that followed would last 4 years, reshaping every aspect of daily life, what could be bought, where people could go, what could be said, and to whom, and in what company. She knows what can be said. More precisely, she knows what cannot be said, and where, and in front of whom. This knowledge is not written anywhere. It is assembled from small signals. A conversation that stops when a door opens, a word replaced by a pause, a look exchanged across a counter that carries more meaning than the transaction it accompanies. The city communicates in this compressed language now. She has become fluent in it. The queue at the bakery on the Rue Saint-Honoré is already 8 people long when she arrives. Bread is rationed, 300 grams per person per day, less for some categories. The bread itself has changed. The flour is mixed with other things now, the loaf denser and darker than it was before June. She does not comment on this. Neither does anyone else in the queue. What the queue does instead is exchange information in the compressed language. A slight tilt of the head toward the end of the street. There are soldiers on the corner this morning. Take the longer route home. A brief word about a shop on a side street that received a delivery yesterday. A silence that acknowledges something shared without naming it. The bread is handed across. The ration card is marked. She places the loaf in her string bag and continues. The market on the Place du Marché Saint-Honoré operates under the same conditions as everything else in occupied Paris. Officially organized, unofficially negotiated. Official channels produce ration quantities. Unofficial ones produce the difference between subsistence and sufficiency. She knows a farmer who comes into the city twice a month with vegetables not entered into any official accounting. She knows this because a neighbor told her, and the neighbor knew because someone else told her. And the chain of knowledge extends back through a network of women who've been maintaining this network since the first autumn of the occupation, without naming it as such, or meeting about it, or deciding together to do it. It simply exists. Because it needs to. She buys carrots and a small amount of dried lentils. The transaction is ordinary on its surface. Below the surface, it is an act of maintenance, of the network, of the household, of the quiet refusal to accept the minimum as the limit. In the afternoon, she works. She is a seamstress, was a seamstress, is still a seamstress, though the work has changed in character. Some clients want alterations to existing garments because new fabric is scarce. Some want her to adapt clothing that belong to people who are no longer in Paris, for reasons she does not ask about. She takes the measurements, makes the alterations, returns the garments. She charges what she charges. She keeps the money in a tin behind the loose board in the kitchen, because the bank account has become a less certain thing than it was before June 1940. The work is quiet. The needle moves. Outside, Paris looks almost exactly as it always looked, if you position yourself carefully and do not include certain details in your field of vision. On the street where she lives, the resistance to occupation takes the form it takes in most streets of most occupied cities. Not dramatic, not organized, not visible, but constant. The concierge of the building does not report the couple on the third floor whose papers are not what they should be. The pharmacist at the corner provides medicines to people without the correct documentation and enters something else in his ledger. The school teacher continues to teach French history in the way it was taught before, with an emphasis that the new curriculum would prefer she omit. None of these people would describe themselves as resistant. They would say they are simply continuing. The distinction matters to them. She passes the pharmacist's window on her way home and does not stop. She does not need to stop. They have already spoken this week, in the compressed language, and the necessary things have been communicated. Evening. The curfew falls at 11. By 9, the streets are quieter than they would have been before the occupation, not because people are frightened exactly, but because the calculation of what is worth the friction of being outside after dark has changed. She sits at the kitchen table with the money from today's work and her list for tomorrow. The tin is behind the board. The list takes shape on paper. What is needed, in order of priority, from which direction of approach. The radio is off. The radio has become a complicated object. Official broadcasts, underground broadcasts, the difficulty of knowing which is which and who might hear which through the walls of a Paris apartment in the autumn of 1940. She prefers the silence. In Paris, under occupation, resistance was not always a pamphlet distributed at risk or a name passed in a doorway. More often it was the continued insistence on the ordinary, the good shoes worn carefully, the correct pace maintained, the list written precisely, the forward gaze held steady against everything that would prefer to be looked at directly. The tin goes back behind the board. The list for tomorrow is folded and placed in the string bag by the door. She turns off the kitchen light. In the dark apartment, the Seine moves outside the window, exactly as it always has, indifferent and continuous and entirely unchanged.